Okay, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us today. This is the first information session for the CRMT-PF, which is a really long acronym that stands for Culturally Responsive Measurement Tool Protective Factors. It's BSK's new assessment tool. We're going to be offering a few more of these information sessions. So if you enjoy this one and know someone else who might be interested, tell your friends to register, and I'll talk more about that at the end. But for now, like I said, I've got some slides that I'm going to go over that are talking about what the CRMT-PF is. We are going to have room for questions at the end, but if anything comes up at any point where you have a question or something's unclear, or if you can't hear me, please go ahead and let me know out loud or in the chat so that we can make sure that you're getting the information that you need. So like I said, this is what we're going to talk through today. We are going to do a quick icebreaker. Then we're going to talk about what protective factors are, since those are a pretty important part of the CRMT-PF. And then we're going to discuss the background of this project and some of the project timeline. And then we are going to talk a little more about the assessment tool itself. Then we're going to spend a good amount of time discussing what you need to do to get ready to implement the CRMT-PF if you are interested in implementing it. And then finally, we're going to talk about next steps. So first, let me briefly introduce myself. My name is M. Carr. I use they, them pronouns. I am a senior project manager at the Capacity Collective. I am currently based out of Asheville, North Carolina, but I used to live in the Seattle area and work for a BSK-funded organization. So I'm very familiar with the region and may have even worked with some of your organizations in the past. My colleague Meredith couldn't be here today, but I do have someone from BSK assisting me. So Lisa, if you don't mind introducing yourself, that would be great.
Yeah, hello everyone. It's good to see so many of you and some familiar faces. I am Lizette Crosco. I use she, her pronouns, and I am an evaluator for Best Starts for Kids, and I'm super excited to be a part of this project and to kind of share this tool out with you all today as part of our first info session.
Thank you so much, Lizette. And again, if you're able to rename yourself so that you have your name in your organization as your Zoom name, that would be wonderful so that we can know who came today. All right, we're going to do, oh, sorry, was there a question?
That's all right. Hi, my name is Elio Arandia, and I work for Intermanos on the BSK part. And I'm all new to this. It's a new program we have this year, and we just barely starting on this. But thank you for the invitation, and I'm glad to be part of it, so I can learn some more about this training.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
We're going to do a quick icebreaker. So if people want to share in the chat, I'm curious, how do you currently assess increased social connection in your program? These are some potential response options. Do you use a survey that your program created, a survey you adapted from somewhere else, an assessment tool? Do you not currently measure this? Is it not something that you worry about? So let me know, how do you currently assess increased social connection? I put my answer in the chat. When I was a home visitor, we didn't assess increased social connection in our program. It looks like some other folks are saying this isn't something they currently measure as well. That's totally okay. Other folks are saying that they have a survey that they created. This isn't something we currently measure. What do you mean by increased social connection? That is a great question. I will elaborate in a moment. It's one of the protective factors in the framework that this tool uses and that Best Starts for Kids uses. So I will make that a little clearer in a moment. Phone-based survey, built on funding requirements surveys, don't currently measure this. Thank you for chiming in, everyone. Yeah, I'm gonna I'm gonna move on and I'm gonna sort of address Ursula's question. But feel free to continue chiming in if you have another way that you assess increased social connection currently in your program. So why am I talking about increased social connection, which might seem like a really vague and random icebreaker question? I'm talking about it because that is one of the protective factors that the CRMT-PF measures. And you might have heard of protective factors before because they're part of the evaluation framework used by Best Starts for Kids to assess your programs. So this is a sort of very formal definition of protective factors from the Center for the Study of Social Policy, the Strengthening Families Framework, which is the where the original survey that we adapted to turn into the CRMT-PF came from. If you are a BSK funded organization or program and you have a PME, like your sort of evaluation plan that you developed with BSK, and it asks you to measure how much, how well, and better off those three categories, protective factors fall into the better off category. So the measures that you've chosen for your better off reporting should map onto the protective factors that I'm going to show on the next slide. So these might look a little familiar to you. Maybe you have to do some semi-annual reporting about, one or more of these protective factors that you've chosen to measure in your program. Let me know if that looks familiar to you. There's the definitions of all of these protective factors. On the right, you can see there's a definition for social supports. So parents and caregivers have support from family, friends, neighbors, and community that helps provide for a family's emotional needs. So to put like generally what protective factors are a little more plainly, besides all of these like specific protective factors, what is a general protective factor? What does that mean? Protective factors are a strengths-based way of measuring resiliency and health in families and communities. So Best Starts for Kids wants to support children in King County growing up happy, healthy, and thriving. That's part of their mission. And a lot of things go into that. When you think about health, of course, there are straightforward things like access to healthcare or medication. Then there might be sort of the next level out, the social determinants of health that we think of, like housing, access to good food. But then there's even less tangible things, which is what the protective factors are aiming to measure and quantify. So we know that all of your programs do an amazing job of helping families be healthy and strengthening these protective factors in the families that you work with. So BSK wanted a culturally responsive way to measure these protective factors and show the impact of community designed, home-based services, which is where this assessment tool comes in. So why is this all important? Why does this matter? Why should we care about protective factors besides that BSK tells us that we have to measure them for semi-annual reporting? Well, a lot of existing assessments out there are deficit-based. They measure risk factors, which is another way of thinking about those sort of like less easily quantifiable, vague, fuzzy social determinants of health. So, for example, an assessment that you might have heard of before is the ACEs assessment, the Adverse Childhood Experiences Assessment, which looks at the connection between adverse childhood experiences and adult health outcomes. It's a really important assessment. It's great that it exists. It's important to acknowledge the impact that trauma and abuse and other adverse childhood experiences have on health. But when you're giving the ACEs and a lot of other assessments that focus only on risk factors to the communities that you're serving, that means that you're focusing over and over again just on trauma and potential risks. So that reduces the communities that you're serving, many of whom have marginalized identities, right, to only negative things, when we know that the families that we're working with are a lot more nuanced and complicated than that. We want to be able to celebrate families, not shame them. So instead of focusing on risk factors or deficits, the protective factors framework that we're using, just to go back to the last slide real quick, this framework, right, that focuses on these protective factors It helps families celebrate their resiliency. And for programs, it helps you see what you're doing to strengthen and reinforce that resiliency. So, of course, I don't necessarily need to sell you on protective factors because you're already measuring them in some way if your Best Starts for Kids funded. So this tool, the CRMT-PF, is a great way to measure protective factors. Of course, increased social connection just might not be one of the ones that you've chosen to measure, and that's okay. But we saw in the chat that a few people said, that they had their own surveys that they created to do that at their organization. And that's great. But if you want a, already made, already tested, already translated measurement tool that's going to measure those things for you in a way that is consistent and has been, tested and assessed with many, many community members, the CRMT-PF is a great tool for that. Okay. And then in addition, the CRMT-PF, as I already mentioned, you can celebrate the work that you're already doing, celebrate the great things that families are doing, better understand what your program is doing to help support families. You can build evidence for community design models. And as I mentioned, this can tie into your BSK reporting. Do we have any questions so far? I don't want to just race through this if I'm being confusing or if anyone has any questions. All right, that's okay. Feel free to drop questions in the chat as I go, or just unmute and ask me a question if anything's unclear. So to talk a little bit briefly about the project background and timeline, because it is kind of relevant. The project goals, this project has been going on for, gosh, I guess 4 or 5 years now, which is kind of wild to think about. But this project, started with these 3 goals. Best Starts for Kids wanted to develop a culturally relevant multilingual tool to measure these protective factors in this Strengthening Families framework for families with children under the age of 5 in King County. Also, BSK wanted to build evidence for community designed home-based services impact, as I mentioned earlier, and also sort of on a more meta level, demonstrate the value of doing this culturally responsive evaluation process for other, funders, public health initiatives, showing that it's really important to use culturally responsive measurement tools, culturally responsive evaluation. So many of the evaluation tools out there, measurement tools, assessments, have been just tested and validated mostly on white middle class families, English speaking families. Sometimes they get translated into Spanish, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they have been tested with Spanish speaking families. So essentially, these tools, they might not feel, and I'm sure you all have had the experience of giving some kind of assessment or survey that your organization is using that you didn't create, giving some kind of assessment tool to a family and thinking to yourself oh, I don't love this. This doesn't feel relevant. This doesn't feel good to give. I feel like this is not strengthening the relationship with the person that I'm giving this survey to. Maybe that's why your organization developed your own surveys. Yeah, and that feeling is not great. You want to build trust with the families you're working with. You don't want to give them an assessment tool that feels not relevant, maybe vaguely offensive, it doesn't apply to them. That's not what we want. So having assessment tools that have actually been tested with the communities that you're serving, and literally communities in King County, right? Hundreds of families in King County have taken this survey at this point and given us feedback on it, and we've changed the survey accordingly. Rest assured that this tool will hopefully resonate with the families that you're serving and be something that you can feel good about administering. So we wanted to focus on 10 key communities in King County when developing this survey. So these are the key communities over on the right-hand side. And we had advisory councils every year made up of service providers from these key communities who also served these key communities. And these communities were also sort of the populations that we targeted when we tested the survey. So the survey was tested with families in King County who held one or more of these identities. Okay, so now focusing on the survey itself. So the CRMT-PF is a 22 question modular survey tool with optional demographic questions at the end. The 22 questions are grouped by the protective factor that they measure. So it's really easy to mix and match sections of the survey to best meet your organization's needs. Like if you only, for your BSK PME plan, measure, 2 out of all of the protective factors, maybe you only want to use those 2 sections and it's super short and you don't want to use the other ones. That's totally possible. The questions are all multiple choice, they're Likert scale, they're really easy to answer. So 22 questions might sound like a lot, but it's all the same response options, so it's really easy to go down. The survey is really highly adaptable in other ways too. So it can be given interview style by staff or taken directly by participants. It can be given just once or many times to measure change over time. And so far it's available in 3 languages and we are working on more languages. And I just want to note again that this tool was adapted, tested, and modified based on the feedback of many, many providers and families in King County. Some of whom might be in this room. I haven't looked at the attendance yet. And yes, I will be sharing the PowerPoint after the training, as well as a recording. So we've been testing this survey over the past 4 years to ensure that the published tool that we're sharing with you today is really culturally responsive and also measures what it's meant to measure. So now I'm going to get into showing you the tool itself. And this is available at the BSK blog that has all of the published materials. I'm going to share that link at the end, but Lisa, if you have it handy and you wanted to drop it in the chat right now, that would also be great. So you can download English, Spanish, or simplified Chinese versions of this to view for yourself as well. So we've got a couple pages. You can see that there's a script to follow at the top. That script is important. We worked hard to create this framing that would hopefully make it really clear what the survey's for, what the answers are going to be used for, how to respond. And that script is translated in the translated versions as well. And then we've got these sort of Likert scale, which is a strongly agree to strongly disagree, 5-point scale. Prefer not to answer is an option for everything. And things are grouped by protective factors. So on page 1, we've got questions 1 through 14. Family resilience is measured in questions 1 through 5. Knowledge of parenting and child development is measured in questions 6 through 9. Social supports in 10 through 14. So you can see what I mean when I say, if you didn't want to measure knowledge of parenting and child development, all you got to do is skip questions 6 through 9, or, in your data system, whatever you're going to use to administer the survey, just don't build those questions in. And voila, you could just sort of continue onwards without having to worry about measuring that one thing. Excuse me. Page 2 also has a script. Again, that's an important part of the survey. Then we've got something that measures concrete supports, and then caregiver-practitioner relationship. And then finally, we've got this demographics page, which is totally optional. I will talk a little more about if you want to implement this survey, some of the decisions that you need to make. One of them is about whether you want this survey to be anonymous or not. If you want the survey to be anonymous, you might want to consider including this demographics section so that you can analyze the results by demographics. So we've got this expanded demographics to try to capture how people self-identify, including Indigenous identities for each grouping. That was something that we added based on feedback that we got. And again, if you decide to give the survey identified and you already collect demographics at your organization, you might decide to skip this page because you already have people's demographics. So it's very flexible. You can kind of add or drop sections according to your organization's needs. And then we've got a last page that is some reflections from the surveyor and also some program information. So just noting what type of survey you gave, when the client started and stopped services, when you did the survey, et cetera. So as I mentioned earlier, so far, this tool is available in 3 languages, English, Spanish, and Simplified Chinese. We are currently working on Somali and Vietnamese. I think the hope is more languages in the future. So if you have a language that you would very much like to see the survey in, get in touch with Lisette and let her know. Hopefully we can have more languages in the future. But we didn't simply just translate the survey into these languages. We translated it and then conducted an extensive testing process in that language with providers who spoke that language and families who spoke that language, who gave us a lot of feedback. So these versions are sort of not just like hastily translated, but have been really tested with those communities in the hope that the survey remained culturally responsive, even as it changed languages. And then I just want to quickly also
I'll pay the bill. I'll talk to you later.
Hi, is there a question? Oh, we've got one in the chat. Did you find that the families preferred doing the demographics anonymously or not? So when we tested the survey, we always included the demographics because we wanted to test the full survey, and it was really more about getting feedback on the survey rather than us actually like collecting the results. So we always did the full survey because we wanted people to say like, hey, that demographic option is confusing, or whatever. So I unfortunately don't have an answer from our administration. I will say, like, based on my time doing data capacity building support for organizations and working with families on demographics related to that, one section in the CRMT-PF, let me go back a little bit. One section does ask about it does ask about caregiver practitioner relationship. That's one of the protective factors. So something to consider is that if you're having like the home visitor that works with that family administer this survey to them conversationally, it might feel a little awkward for them to ask them these questions, right? When I talk to staff from this program about my problems, they seem to understand. The staff from this program genuinely care about me. The staff from this program have respect for me. The staff from this program help me when I need it. I heard some of the people that helped us test this survey said, wow, that section like sparked such a great conversation about their experience in this program, and they gave me great feedback, and we had like a really good sort of reflection together on what they've accomplished in this program, and it felt really good. I had also other practitioners say it felt really awkward to ask those questions. If I was to use this survey, I would want like another home visitor to survey my families because it felt too awkward and it didn't feel like they could answer honestly. So I think it really depends. If you're including this protective factor section, so questions 19 through 22, you may want to consider either giving the survey anonymously and therefore including demographics, or having like another staff member give the survey to the family. So that kind of ties into the demographics. Sorry, I don't have a more thorough answer for you, Ursula. Any other questions about the survey itself before I discuss the supporting materials?
Hi, this is Nina Evers. I had a quick question about, can you hear me first of all?
Yes,
Okay,
yeah.
good. I had a quick question about whether you had thought any or see any part of this as giving sort of more refined information about the context of the community and what, I'm thinking particularly relative to social supports. And of course, I I'm doing work at a state level and thinking about, really rural communities, et cetera. Yeah, so that was the only question I had about that. I think it's wonderful. Yes, it's really exciting to hear about this.
Yeah, thank you. Honestly, like we have not, I don't think, I haven't considered the tool in that light, and that wasn't necessarily one of our stated goals in developing it. I think that that's a really interesting potential application. And, we're focused so much on like sort of a smaller scale level, really looking at even down to the individual relationship between the home visitor and the family. And that's where we've really been scaled in. So it's interesting to zoom back out and think a little bit more on a population level. So that is not something that we explicitly considered when we were developing and testing it, but that's a really interesting thought. And if you have more ideas about how you might want to apply the tool with that in mind, feel free to send me an email. We can talk more about it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions about the tool itself before I go over the supporting materials? All right. So just to give a quick overview, if you click that link that Lisette sent in the chat earlier, you're going to see a bunch of downloadable things, not just the tool itself. There's the implementation guide, the quick guides, handouts, and the scoring calculator. And I'm going to quickly go over each of these. Unfortunately, these are currently available only in English. Maybe in the future, they will be available in different languages. And if there is, again, a language that you would particularly like to see these in, please let us know. So just to let you know what you might be downloading if you are looking for supporting materials, the implementation guide is a super comprehensive overview of everything you might need to know about the CRMT-PF. It's really long, but there's a lot of really good information in it. It sort of just should be kind of the ultimate reference guide. If you have a question, I would definitely recommend that you go there and leaf through it because it covers pretty much everything. So for all the way from like, what is this tool? Should I use it? Why should I use it? When should I use it? How to implement it? Then what to do afterwards. So it walks you through all of that. And it's a very long PDF. So I would check that out if you need like if you're the type of person that likes to have the like really comprehensive guide on hand, that is the thing to download. If you want more of a at a glance overview, we've got some quick guides, implementation and scoring quick guide that are much shorter and just sort of answer FAQs and give you a brief overview of implementation information. So much more at a glance, but also still hopefully useful if you are trying to, leave this session and get someone else at your organization on board with this. You might want to share a document like this with them that's a little bit less intimidating. And then also we have these handouts that are super fast, like 1-page reference information on a couple topics. There's a few of them on the blog. We've got an overview of the CRMT-PF. What are protective factors? What is the CRMT-PF? FAQ, scoring overview. So again, these can be helpful to share with other staff members at your organization if you are talking to them about implementing, or if you want to just refresh yourself on any of these things, these could be helpful things to look at. And then we've got a scoring calculator, which is a downloadable Excel spreadsheet with detailed instructions on how to enter the scores that you get from the administering the survey and calculate protective factor scores. During the rest of the session and also during the training, we're going to talk a lot more about scoring, what to do with the data, how to score. So the scoring, you might end up using your own internal database and not need a scoring calculator at all, but it's there as an option if you need it. And then we are currently working on some short videos. So these will be available later this year. We're going to have a couple of videos, including an introduction to the CRMT-PF, how to administer and score it, and how to understand and use the data. So those are going to be like really short 5-minute videos. just to help you brush up on these things. But those will be coming again. Right now, they're going to be in English, but they're going to be coming later this year. And then I will say, I'm going to mention this again at the end, but we have a full length training that we have that a couple times this year being offered. You can register using the same link that you used to register for this. And that's going to talk about all of those topics in a lot more detail. So that would be the next step if you are hoping to use this tool. So if you like what I said so far and you're interested and you might want to implement the CRMT-PF, there are a lot of decisions that you're going to need to make. And we're going to talk about some of these in a lot more detail in the training, but this is just to get your brain started on these things because there's a lot of considerations to be made. Because the survey is so flexible, that means that there's a lot of points where you need to sort of, take a left or right down the path. So these are some things to keep in mind as you think about implementing this tool. And we also have a checklist that we're going to send out afterwards that includes some things to consider as you get ready for the training. So who should use this tool? Well, programs that serve families with children under the age of 5. We didn't test this tool specifically with older children. Research that we've looked into has shown that it should theoretically still apply to older children. And so if you have a program that serves older children, there's nothing to say that you can't use it. But the population that we tested it with, that we're certain it works with, is families with children under the age of 5. You should use this if you would like to measure your impact on protective factors. As I mentioned, you can also use this modularly. You should use this if you would like to have an idea of how the families that you serve are doing with one or more protective factors. And you should use this tool if you offer repeated services to a family. So even though I'm biased and I think that this is a great tool because I've been working on this project for a while, if you offer like one-off walk-in, drop-in services and there's the likelihood that you're never going to see the family again, this is probably not the right tool for your program, unfortunately. We really recommend that someone have at least 6 service hours like with your program before they take this, ideally even longer. So, just consider whether it's the right fit based on that. I see a question in the chat. If we are interested, we are at a pretty large org. Would your team be willing to come to us to train our team versus trying to get our folks registered to the couple of trainings? Yeah, absolutely. I am going to talk about that more at the end, but we still recommend that leadership staff come to the training because it's going to include a lot of information about sort of like some organizational decision making that you'll need to make, again, about like, are you going to do paper or electronic? Are you going to put it in your data system, et cetera? But there is free implementation support available to BSK funded organizations to get personalized support from us on implementing this tool. And so that could absolutely be one of the things we do, is to support in a training for your organization. So I'll put my information on how to get connected to that at the end of the session. So this is what you've got to do before now in the training to get ready to start to think about using the CRMT-PF. You need to think about each of these things. And like I said, I have a checklist that I'm going to send out at the end. But this is sort of what you should be running down in your brain and talking about with the other staff at your organization to get ready to actually use this survey. So first you have to think about, what do you want to do with the data? Again, these are the protective factors. Are you trying to use this to do your semi-annual reporting? In which case you probably want to make sure that you are using at the very least the sections that align with the protective factors that you've identified for semi-annual reporting. Are you trying to understand something else? We had some providers tell us that they found that using the concrete support section, which asks a lot about, Has it been difficult for you to afford certain things? What do you have access to? They found that that was super helpful in starting conversations with their families about their needs and better understanding their needs. So maybe you're kind of trying to use it as a needs assessment. Maybe you want to look at parent, caregiver, and program staff relationships to get feedback on your program. There's a lot of potential applications for this, and that could inform what parts of the survey you use and how you give the survey. Additionally, if you want to measure change over time, that's something that you should consider and think about. So, if you want to see where people are on certain protective factors, it could be about referrals, like I said, with concrete supports or securing benefits. You could also measure the impacts of your program. So, looking at what increases while in your program so that you can really have evidence for how effective your program is. Your program is effective, but you could demonstrate that with this. BSK reporting. Something else to think about is what assessments you currently use. So you're going to want to check those for survey fatigue. It's never fun when you have to take like a million surveys or fill out a ton of forms when you go to a doctor's office or something. You don't want to replicate that experience for the people that you're serving. Ideally, you are not doing a million forms and assessments at once and they don't feel super repetitive. So it's a good idea to just look at what surveys and assessments are you already doing with each family? How often are you doing them? Is there overlap? Like, are you doing other similar things? Are you already collecting information on any protective factors? And just really think about, will adding this assessment have a positive or negative impact on your relationships with your families? If you think it's going to have a negative impact on the relationship with your families, you might not want to use this tool, and that's okay. Perhaps you already have a bunch of assessments that you have to use because of funders, and you think that adding this would just create too much burden. That's all right. Maybe it's not the time for it. Ultimately, we want this to have a positive impact on your relationships with the families that you're serving. Also look at timing. So it takes about 30 minutes to give this survey. It could take more or less depending on a couple of things, but we found it's roughly 30 minutes. So that's something to consider. You have to think about when in the program will you use the tool, at the beginning of services, second intake meeting, end of services. Are you going to give it multiple times? That ties into frequency. So how often will you give it? This can be given once. It can be given twice, like at the start and at the end of services. It can also be given at regular intervals over time. So maybe you give it every 6 months to see change over time. And again, that ties into what your goals are. If you really want to demonstrate the impact of your program, you probably need a baseline as well as at least one more survey to show what change your program created, right, in the protective factor score. So your data goals will inform some of these decisions that you have to make. Also think about, the survey version that you want to use. So one time or pre-post, if you're administering it once, it's only going to be one time, it's less repetition, but you can't track change over time. Pre-post, you're going to give it near the beginning of services and at least one more time while in the program. That could create more survey fatigue, but it also gives you the ability to track change over time. And again, think about this modularly. So you can chop the survey up and only use the parts that you want. You can use the whole thing. It is up to you. You also need to think about how you're going to support families in completing the survey. So when we tested this, I will say we tested it universally with staff conversationally because we wanted to gather feedback from the families in conversations. That was how we tested it. We got feedback from the staff that were helping us test this survey that, wow, this was a great conversation. It really supported like our relationship building. I felt like I got a lot closer to the families I was serving and I understood them better. But that also takes a lot of time. It can also, as I mentioned earlier, be uncomfortable to answer certain questions. For example, the section on how is our program doing, that might feel awkward. Also, you know, culturally, it might be, we got feedback from, you know, certain organizations that they felt like the families that they were serving didn't want to talk about money with them. So the concrete support section felt really uncomfortable to fill out, whereas others said that that wasn't an issue. So, you know, just consider those sorts of things as you're thinking about whether you would want this to be filled out with staff or alone. Now, if it's completed alone, you have the ability to do it anonymously. You might get a worse response rate though, because people might not, you know, if it's optional and you don't have a home visitor doing it in front of you with you, you might not just do it. Uh, Also, that means that the family can't ask questions if they get confused. I'm seeing the question, can we administer some sections with staff and some alone? Yeah, you absolutely can. For sure. If you administer some sections identified and some anonymously, consider that you won't be able to sort of put those together for an overall protective factor score. So, for example, if you were giving just the section on practitioner staff relationship anonymously because you wanted people to feel comfortable being honest about their experiences with the program, that would have to be a kind of standalone thing, and you would not be able to see things like change over time for that, right? If it's anonymous, you can't see change over time. So that's something else to consider. But yes, it is absolutely possible to give some of this with staff and some of it alone. You're also gonna have to decide on in-person or virtual. There's a lot of decisions to make. So in-person or virtual, you know, it really depends on your program's model and what your participants prefer. And then also a format for administering the tool, so paper or electronic. This also really depends on your organization, how your home visits look, how your model looks, what database you have, what, you know, tools you have. Like, do you have iPads? Do your home visitors normally use them? Is it going to be like jarring and, you know, sort of interrupt the flow of the home visit? So no one setup is better than another. These are all just decisions that you have to make when you want to think about how to administer and implement this tool. Yeah. And then finally, you're going to have to think about data storage and analysis. So to be able to use the data, you're going to have to store it somewhere. You're going to have to be able to score each module of the assessment. And then if you want to see change over time, you're going to have to be able to store the first scores to compare to the post scores. And you're going to have to know that they're connected, which is why if it's anonymous, you can't do pre-post because you're not going to know whose surveys are connected to each other. So, you know, think through if you're using paper forms, what are your processes? Who's going to print the forms? How are the forms going to be shared and stored? Who's going to do the data entry from the forms into whatever system you're using? How are you going to calculate? Are you going to use the scoring calculator that we have or something else? And then if you're using your database, can you customize your database to even include this information? Can you add all of the questions? Can you have it calculate? Is it just scores? Like, are you only putting stuff in at the end? Can you link to the family's profile to be able to cross tab by demographics? So lots of things to consider. So hopefully that didn't seem overwhelming. If it did, though, I want to, you know, reiterate that all of those things we're going to talk about in way more detail at our trainings. So we've got a bunch of potential next steps. First of all, you can access the print materials. You can download these using that link that Lisette shared in the chat earlier. So if you want to just take a closer look at the survey, look at the implementation guide or anything, download the materials from the BSK blog, and that will be available there. Thank you so much, Lisette. There's also a QR code that you can use here to download those materials. And that, I think, is I know we looked at the survey together, but looking at it more closely on your own time might really help inform your decision on whether you want to implement this tool. We also have trainings. So we've got 2 trainings coming up, Thursday, June 27th from 12 to 2, and Monday, September 16th from 9 to 11. These are train the trainer, so they are not intended for direct service staff who are going to be giving the survey. They are intended for program managers and directors and other supervisory staff. So the goal is to prepare you to oversee the implementation and train direct service staff in administering the CRM-T-PF. So we ideally will have people who are then going to go to their organizations and hold a training for their staff on how to give the CRM-T-PF. So that is the intended audience, and Lisette put the link on how to register for the workshops there, the trainings there, and there's also a QR code here. There are more info sessions scheduled later this year. They are a repeat of this, so you do not need to worry about attending them again. It's going to be the same material. We're going to be saying the same things that I said today. So don't worry about like you're not missing anything by not coming to the, all the info sessions have the same material and all the trainings have the same material. It's not a part 1 or 2 in anything. That being said, if you know another organization that might be interested in this and you want to send them information on the info session, please do so. And you do not have to be like 100% positive that you're going to use the tool to attend the training. If you're still considering it, but not sure, you can definitely still attend. I mean, it is time, right? So it's up to you about whether you want to invest that much time, but absolutely, you do not have to have already decided to attend the training. That's a great question, Rachel. And again, if there are further questions that would help inform your decision, I would recommend looking at the implementation guide, but you can also get in touch with us. And I'll put my email in the chat again. If you have any questions, we would be really happy to answer them. And finally, you can also get free personalized implementation support. So BSK funded organizations can get support through Best Starts for Kids technical assistance. Any organization that receives BSK funding can get the support even if your program specifically isn't BSK funded. And what we would support you with would be guidance through the implementation checklist and all of the steps and decisions that I just talked about earlier, and support with data storage and analysis. And that support would come from myself and Meredith, who is not here today. So we are happy to work with your organization one-on-one to help you implement this tool if you are interested. And if you would like that, yeah, you can email us. You can also fill out, where is I thought there was an interest link, Lisette, that I dropped somewhere that I now cannot find. Sorry about that. We can send the link in the follow-up email. But yeah, you can email us or fill out the link that I'll send in the follow-up email to indicate interest. Also, finally, if you are an organization that serves Somali-speaking or Vietnamese-speaking families, or you know of an organization that does, you can get involved with us. You can become one of our community partners to test the survey in these languages as we develop the survey in these languages. So fill out our interest form and we will get in touch with you. And Lisette, I've got the link for that too. This is also a general feedback form for this session. So if you could fill it out, it's really short. Just give us some feedback on how we did, what you're thinking for next steps. That would be super helpful. And there's also a space there, to become a community partner if you're interested. And that is a compensated position. So if your organization is interested or you know of another organization, please let us know. Oh. All right. Any questions? I'll stop sharing so I can see everyone. All right, well, I'm going to stay on. If anyone has questions, feel free to stay on and chat with me. If not, you can take the extra minutes to fill out that feedback form. That would be super helpful. It's that link that we just put in the chat. And again, if you have any questions at all, or you're interested in implementation support, please send us an email and we would be happy to talk more with you. And thank you all for coming today.